Everyone, so the recording is going to start in a second. Thanks everyone very much for joining us today for this ERSA and NPC event. I know we've got people still joining us, we've got a packed agenda, so we're going to get started now. Today we're going to be discussing what the UK Shared Prosperity Fund means for charities. We at NPC have been really interested in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund for some time as a kind of key pot of money to support social causes in levelling up. Polling we did showed that social causes were top of the things that people wanted levelled up in their area, but our analysis shows that so far only a small minority of the overall levelling up funding has gone on social infrastructure and programmes to tackle social causes, with the majority going on hard infrastructure. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund is an opportunity to redress this, and there's two specific strands that charities are likely to be interested in. The first one on community in place, and also the strand on people and skills, which our speakers are going to run through in a second. But there are some concerns which have been raised, including by ourselves, on how the fund will operate, and with the people and skills strands not starting in earnest until 2024-25. So here to discuss these issues, the opportunities and the challenges today are three fantastic speakers: Theo Specht from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, Tejesh Mistry from the Venture Trust, and Heather Waddington from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. But I'm just going to hand over to Elizabeth Taylor, who's the CEO of ERSA, for a brief introduction.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I'll just do a little introduction. I know that some of you know me and are familiar with the work of ERSA, but for those of you that aren't, ERSA is the membership trade body for employment support and skills organisations. Many of our members have delivered employment and skills since the mid-1980s, and I personally worked on my first European funded provision in 1986. So this is a matter, an issue, a concern that's very close to our hearts. I think it's worth saying that ERSA represents the whole employment support sector, but the majority of our members are third sector. And the members that are the really big private sector primes will also have third sector supply chains. So this isn't just about employment and skills per se. This is about those small local organisations that are in our membership and that are delivering for some of the big nationals, and in turn for the Department of Work and Pensions, Ministry of Justice, DfE, etc. So we have been working on what would happen to European funded employment skills provision since the Brexit vote. In fact, before we were in preparation. And we never dreamed that there would be no seamless continuation. We never wanted the same projects funded again, because there's always been a natural cycle going back, right back to the 1980s. It's been about defining local need, going out to procure new European funded provisions. So there has always been that turnover, but we never envisaged the gap. So the gap is of great concern to us at ERSA and to our members. Theo just mentioned about in the UKSPF prospectus, it would appear that there is a gap, and it is not until 2024 that we start seeing those local employment projects coming on board. But beyond that, there's no guarantee that in writing the local plans that employment and skills will be a consideration. And so I think there are local authorities who've had a history of being involved in ESIF, who've been involved through their LEPs, who, gosh, back in the day, will have been involved through local enterprise partnerships, techs, whatever, delivering European funding. They're well geared up to consider employment and skills. But for many of the smaller ones, this is real new territory and isn't always the easiest thing to go out and procure. So we have been raising the profile of the employment support community, and we've taken some actions that I'll close with. But I think one of the really important things is, yes, we are concerned about those third sector businesses that deliver employment skills. But just equally as important is the people that they serve. They serve a different cohort to the job centres. They work with those furthest from the labour market. They have projects that reach out and engage in communities and get people to the point where they are ready for work. And I think at this time, when we're seeing labour market shortages, when we've got the cost of living crisis, it's even more important that we have those local funded provisions. We're all seeing within the job centres way to work, where frontline work coaches are fast tracking people into vacancies. And that is right for some job seekers, but for many, it isn't the right way, and it isn't going to get people into sustained employment. So that quick route into work won't work for all. And for me, that really strengthens the need for the sort of provisions that have had European funding. So what we're doing is, we know that there is a workaround. There's a voluntary sector consideration in that local authorities can choose pre-24 to fund employment and skills. I don't know that they all are fully aware of it, and they don't all necessarily know how to do it. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to make the case for local provision, for engagement activities in communities, for preparing people for work, and then equally important, for working with local employers to get the right people into their vacancies. So we're working with the wider third sector, because I think when you're doing something that is such a big challenge, you need to link to other advice agencies, other European funded provisions. So we have, for the last 4 years, been working with NCVO, with MPC, with Equally Ours, and with others through the umbrella group that NCVO have brought together, many of whom will be on the call today. And so finally, just to tell you some of the things that ERSA have done, and very happy to share some of the communications that we've sent out through our network and to our members. We wrote to every local authority chief executive. We wrote to every elected leader of a council of any size. We've written to MPs, and we've written to devolved commissioners, and we've written in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. And we've engaged and reached out to ministers, and are beginning to have conversations with ministers and shadow ministers. But for me, it feels like the clock's ticking now. People are writing the investment plans. We did a bit of our own market research last week, and we contacted some local authorities who didn't have a UKSPF lead yet. So what we're doing now is, we're writing to chief executive departments to try and get those leads. We're seeing some places that are taking great initiative, so it's not that bleak, barren landscape everywhere. But where we're seeing local authorities that are reaching out and asking about employment skills, we're going to share that so that others can put that in front of offices at their local authority. So ERSA really welcomes being here this morning, really welcomes working with the wider third sector. We'll continue to do that through NCVO, and I'm really pleased to be with you all and to hear from the other speakers.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. A really helpful overview of the Shared Prosperity Fund and some of the issues at play that are relevant to the voluntary sector. Now to explain a little bit more about that is our first speaker, Theo Specht. Till is the head of delivery at the UK Shared Prosperity Fund at the Department for Levelling Up Housing Communities. And he'll be speaking to us today about the fund, how it's going to operate, and some of the opportunities for charities within it. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Till.
Thank you very much. And before I start, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank both MPC and ERSA for organizing this event and for having me. I think it's a really great opportunity to talk to you all, share some of our thoughts on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and then also hear in the discussion your views. I'm just going to try and get my slides going. I hope everyone can see that, but I'll kick off. So yeah, as Theo says, my name is Theo Specht. I work in the Department for Levelling Up, working on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So hopefully all of you are suitably aware of what the UKSPF is, but it's basically the replacement for ERDF and ESF with some nuances around the edges. It's £2.6 billion over the spending review, although 559 million of that is for Multiply, a adult numeracy initiative run by the Department for Education in England and by us in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The funding is ramping up from this financial year, reaching 1.5 billion in 2025. And what we've tried to do really is to empower each place to identify and build on their own strengths and needs at a local level. So empowering local authorities to deliver this fund and tailoring it to their needs locally. We're focusing it on building pride in place, but also increasing life chances. And the delivery model is by design delegated to local authorities, but very much supported by local partners, which is of course where you come in. So one thing to say is that it's not a standalone sort of program in isolation. We want places to use the UKSPF in conjunction with other programs such as the Levelling Up Fund or existing sort of employment and skills support that can be enhanced via the UKSPF. Briefly, we have three priorities: community in place, supporting local business, and people and skills. And as Theo already said, probably the community in place and people and skills ones are the most relevant ones in this context, though it might well be possible that some of you will have thoughts and or sort of a role in delivering some of the local business support as well. There are some example interventions, but we published alongside the prospectus a wide list of interventions on gov.uk, a long list that places can choose from under each of these pillars. As Elizabeth said, the people and skills pillar is available in England from 24-25, with the exception of voluntary and community organisations. The main thing to say really is that we kept these interventions deliberately broad and high level. So we're asking places to come up with an investment plan. We're not asking for specific projects sort of over the next 3 years, but instead asking them to identify local needs and opportunities and how the broad themes under each pillar sort of relate to those needs and opportunities. And that, I think, is reflected in our delivery approach. So the local authority will be given responsibility for developing the plan that the Department for Levelling Up then has a role in approving. The local authority has the allocation to manage over the 3 years, is responsible for assessing and approving project applications, processing the payments once they've received payment from us, and the day-to-day monitoring of their local programme. As I said, the investment plans are based on an assessment of local needs and opportunities, which means there isn't any kind of ring fence, if you like, for any of the 3 pillars. The only restriction being that 24-25 sort of time limit for people and skills interventions. But if local need identifies that virtually all of the money should go into business support, that is possible. But we obviously encourage all local authorities to think long and hard how their local needs can be met with this fund. Funding can be delivered through a range of ways. So we believe that competition for grant funding is probably sensible. It's the default approach that we in government adopt, although obviously with the UKSPF we're going a more allocative route as a sort of baseline of funding. But especially in the community in place, but also conceivably in some of the people and skills elements, the other avenues might be sensible. So procurement, commissioning of services, or even some delivery of in-house activity by the local authority might be conceivably a way to deliver. So what does that mean for stakeholders? So we believe firmly that local insight and expertise is essential for the local authority to identify and shape their local UKSPF. which is why we are expecting local leaders to work with a wide range of local stakeholders, civil society organizations, such as the bodies that you represent, but also, employer bodies, businesses, as well as local members of parliament, essentially all those stakeholder groups who know their local patch well, who know what the needs and opportunities are. So local authorities will be forming partnership groups over the, hopefully they are already forming them, but in some areas of the country where we've had local elections, it might be that they're only now forming them. So what we would encourage you to do is contact them, contact your councillor, contact your local authority, and make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure that you contribute to local plans, but also push for sector representation on these groups. Where possible, do engage with them. I think the main thing at the moment is to shape what the investment plan looks like locally. We also believe that you have an opportunity here through the networks that you have to share best practice and share insights of what other local authorities are doing with your local authority. We appreciate that there is an onus that we're putting on both local authorities and organizations such as yours by adopting this decentralized delegated delivery approach, and that is challenging. We hope that the UKSPF is part of a sort of culture change that gives more responsibility and opportunity to local areas, but appreciate that the timelines can be challenging at the moment. As I said, in England, the People and Skills activity will not be available until 2024-25, with the exception of voluntary organisations that are currently delivering ESF activity and at risk of failure. If you believe that that fits you, do highlight that to your local authority. As Elizabeth said, some local authorities are more experienced than others in both the knowledge of how ESF was delivered and also in the sort of picture they have of local providers and activity. So partly there is an ask on you to make yourself known to the local authority, and partly an ask on the local authority to consider whether the activity ought to be continued in some shape or form. We expect you to work with local authorities, make the case for that provision, both in years 1 and 2 through voluntary organisations, but then also from 24-25 onwards. So making sure that as these plans are for 3 years, that local authorities consider what kind of provision they want to undertake, deliver from 24-25. A bit of help and resource. So both my department and the Department for Work and Pensions have local contact points that might be helpful. So DWP have some strategic partnership managers, and I'm sure we can share contact details and names after this event. And in DLUC, we have area teams for each part of the country. I should also briefly highlight before I come to the end of my presentation that the Department for Work and Pensions is running some engagement events with local authorities over the coming days to highlight both existing provision by the department, but also what kind of activities ESF funded and useful resources for them to consider as they draw up their investment plans, which we hope will really benefit those smaller authorities with less experience, but might also be a helpful pointer for other local authorities. With that, I will stop my brief presentation, and I really look forward to the discussion in a little bit.
Thanks very much for that overview, Theo. That was really helpful, and I'm sure I've given people a good grounding into how the fund is going to operate. Please keep your questions coming in, everyone in the audience. We're going to take them together at the end once we've gone through each of the speakers, but it's great to be able to see what people want to discuss. Next, we're going to move on to Tejesh Mistry. Tejesh is the Director of External Affairs at the Scottish charity The Venture Trust, who were funded under the previous European structural funds and are now looking to the UKSPF and are going to be sharing some of their reflections on what they're hoping for from the fund from a voluntary sector perspective. So over to you, Tejesh.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much. Just going to take a second to try and share my screen with you as well. Hopefully you can all see that now. Great to see such a significant representation from the third sector. It's obviously very important that we play a key role in maintaining and creating dialogue around this area, and developing an understanding of how we can play a key role in meeting those outcomes that Til's been talking about. As Theo mentioned, I'm the Director of External Affairs at Venture Trust. We support Scotland's most vulnerable people, those who suffer from a range of issues, particularly extreme trauma, poverty, and we support them to develop their skills, particularly to live a more positive and healthy life. I just want to give a bit of an overview of who we are and what we do as Venture Trust, a bit about our delivery model as it's relatively unique, and then to spend some time just talking about what the UK Shared Prosperity Fund means for us, both in terms of challenge and opportunity. So as I said, we work with Scotland's most vulnerable. The context is that we have been receiving as a recipient of the ESF European Social Funds, and that accounts for about 10 to 12% of our turnover. Alongside that, we've started to see an emergence of No One Left Behind funding streams here in Scotland, and we're also a recipient of the Community Renewal Fund as well. And we see opportunity through the UKSPF, but I think, I feel through the conversations we have across the sector here, it's fair to say there's a level of concern and anxiety around what the transition will mean, and also the feeling that there's significant risk attached to this area of work. So I just want to use a couple of pictures just to try and bring life a little bit what we do as an organisation. We describe our work as intensive personal development, and this is a bit of what this means. This is people outdoors, using that kind of perfect environment and nature and wilderness to provide some challenge for the people that we work with, an opportunity to reflect, the chance to kind of work together, but also those kind of peaceful and broad-ranging opportunities that you get in the wilderness. We're obviously very lucky here in Scotland to have that asset. We also use urban green spaces and nature in general, more increasingly blue spaces as well. Our model is steeped in a process of thinking about experiential learning using the outdoors, and is driven by cognitive developmental techniques, particularly thinking about behaviour change theory and choice theory. And we seek to build skills and particularly to unlock confidence in the people that we work with. We deliver our model by starting within the community, utilising the outdoors for that second stage of building skills and outdoor learning, and then supporting people towards more of a positive outcome and the next stage of their journey. What we find is not everybody is ready to take on that journey, particularly the people that we work with. They may need additional support. It's not a linear path, and we often find that takes time for people to achieve that positive outcome. We underpin our work with an outdoor therapy service, which is quite a new, innovative service that we're offering, using counselling, one-to-one walk and talk, as well as group support in the outdoors, and additional employability support alongside that. So just that little bit more about the people that we work with. Our participants have complex and multiple barriers, particularly around mental health. Almost 7 out of 10 would describe themselves as having significant mental health challenges. Often will have experienced trauma, poverty, limited education. People may be at risk of homelessness. May have experienced things like self-harm, PTSD. A large proportion of our participants are also care experienced. So quite a challenging group of people to work with, but a huge level of opportunity in terms of what we can do to support their lives, and a real kind of level of change there. I think the first key point to make with the UKSPF is that from our point of view and what we're seeing with the people that we work with is that this work is never more needed really at this point. We're emerging from the pandemic. We're seeing significant mental health challenges for the people that we work with, and a risk to that ongoing provision is a real issue. We find that people we're working on are sort of teetering on the edge. We're not working within normal times. And any delays to those preventative types of services, we believe will have a knock-on effect for society, medium, longer term. In our case, particularly looking at what will happen around the justice system and the health system as well, moving ahead. We've also seen there's a significant level of inequality in terms of people's ability to access nature, particularly those from low-income backgrounds as well. The experience we've had in COVID and what we've seen accentuates that. Working with the participants that we did, we moved a lot of our services online. It wasn't the same as working face-to-face with the people that we work with, and relationships are very significant. So that ability to work with people in a local place-based manner is really important for what we do, and needs to be considered in the way that organisations like ours on a local level do their work moving forwards. We are obviously moving to more of a localised approach, and particularly the opportunity for commissioning through local authorities. It's nothing new. We've seen that transition for a while, and we see lots of positives, but also some potential challenges in that space as well. We are a national organisation. We're active within 26 of the 32 local authorities in Scotland. Primarily focused around the urban areas where there is a range of disadvantaged communities. We particularly will find a level of challenge around the business development opportunity that we have. We have a relatively small team. We have 60 staff overall. So the opportunity to build those relationships and to get in touch with all those local authorities imagine will be a challenge for a lot of your organisations as well. As Till said, there's likely to be a range of commissioning structures, as well as a range of other systems around monitoring and so on that we will see. So that is also something that we are contending with already, but is a challenge for us in terms of our own capacity, as well as our own systems as well. When we approach a local area, though we're a relatively small national charity, we are perceived as this huge supermarket, the Asda, coming into town. And from our point of view, that's not the case. We're very much embedded in communities. We have local community-based staff who work with local partners, local organisations, local statutory provision. And it's difficult that we are perceived in some circumstances as that national charity. A quick anecdote that I wanted to share with you, which I'd call the bake-off effect. Very recently, we've been working with a local authority here in Scotland, and a really positive experience. They're very engaged. They're very keen for us to work alongside them, and ran a local networking event for partnership organisations. So a really positive experience. But it just, one of the things they asked a member of my team to do was to bring along something that they've baked as a kind of a bake-off type of thing for the day. And I thought that, that's a lot of fun. It was something really great, but it just for me highlighted that level of intensity around those local relationships that's very difficult for us as an organisation to replicate across multiple local authorities on a national scale. One of the big opportunities we see is the opportunity to have a strengthened partnership. We've started to work more on a consortium basis, partnering with other organisations. These are often led by larger charities than ours, and that's a strength in terms of their capacity and ability to coordinate that type of approach. It also allows us to focus on our specialism and to contribute as part of a pathway for the people that we support. So there's a real joined up approach at a local level. The provision can be place-based and working alongside partners. And we also see that type of opportunity across some of the other partnerships that we're working with. So it's quite a strong push around the Young Person's Guarantee in Scotland, and we can see quite a few benefits to that approach as well. So just in conclusion, we are seeing significant risk to that provision. If there is a gap, there's a slightly different approach in Scotland. There isn't necessarily going to be that perceived gap in the people and skills funding. But we are naturally concerned about that transition process. It's always a challenge. As a society, we really can't afford for there to be a gap. These services are very much needed at the moment, and particularly at a time on the back of the COVID pandemic. We aren't in normal times, and we're seeing accentuated challenges on the back of the COVID period. And partnership is going to be important moving forwards. We recognise that, and we look forward to working with other organisations to find those solutions on a local level. So just say thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Great to see lots of third sector partners here as well. And we know it's very important that we keep talking and emphasising the importance of our role moving forward in this type of fund.
Thanks very much, Tejesh. Really helpful overview of some of the voluntary sector considerations for you and the people you work with, particularly around those local considerations which charities need to keep in mind and how you're thinking about approaching that. We're going to hand over now to our last speaker, who's Heather Waddington, the head of European Structural and Investment Funds at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. And Heather's going to be speaking about some advice and practical guidance on charities about how they should be thinking of engaging with local authorities. So Heather, hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Theo. Can I just double check you can see my slides okay?
We can see your slides. It's not full screen though.
Right, I did this earlier, so apologies to everybody. I'm used to Teams. I can do Teams, not a problem, but Zoom I am not as good as, and I am not sure how to get it on. In fact, I'm just going to stop sharing actually before maybe I'll just talk actually. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you all today. So just as an introduction, yes, my name is Heather Waddington. I am the head of ESIF in West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and for the LEP, Leeds City Region LEP. I have over 30 years experience of EU structural funds, but my other day job is future funding policy, so things like UK Community Renewal Fund, and I am the lead in West Yorkshire for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. They all fall within my strategy portfolio. It's not often I try to disagree with my central government colleagues, but I think it's really important in terms of the context of the session today. In Til's presentation, and Til, happy to discuss this offline too, but all I heard throughout the conversation was the word about local authorities and local councils. I do not work for a local authority. I do not work for a local council. I work for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. It's the mayoral Combined Authority. And I work extremely closely with the other combined authorities and mayoral combined authorities across the country, as well as many, many local authority colleagues. But I think it's really important to start with that distinction, actually, because if we do not kind of acknowledge that distinction, you as key stakeholders to all of us across the country, whether we're mayoral combined authority or local authority, you will find it very difficult to navigate and understand what is going on. Local authorities are working in a very different way to what we as a mayoral combined authority may be required to do. So I just wanted to really start with that in terms of the engagement with stakeholders, and what I'm going to just try and do is I'll try again to share my screen, but I just want to try and bring to life what this means in practice for colleagues like me leading on SPF and trying to interpret the government's guidance and put together a programme of activity. I'm really struggling with being able to, so I'm going to try once more. People who do know me across the country maybe will know that I tend to talk rather than use screen presentations anyway, so it's not a problem if we can't get it on. But I did want to go back to something that Elizabeth had said really about the context. I don't think, for some reason, I can't seem to get it on full screen, Theo, so I apologise.
If you just click that icon in the bottom right, Heather, next to the Zoom, that should go full screen on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I've tried that, but I've got, yeah, it doesn't seem to want to go. It did it earlier, and for some reason I can't do it now.
I think we can read it anyway as well, though, so it's not a problem if not.
Right, I apologise. I'm not sure why it's not doing that. So I just want to start off with really just very quickly in terms of what Elizabeth said about the context for this being a success of funding. I think we as leads in the local area, it is replacing the European Structural Fund, but I think it's fair to say it's not a like-for-like replacement. And I think probably Till would probably agree with me in that respect, in that I think it's really important that we don't see it as a like-for-like replacement. It's not quite economic development as you know, ESIF was positioned, and it's much broader, with additional challenges with it being broader, and therefore with less money there are more issues to consider about how you you know, slice the cake and what you choose to do at a local level in terms of what your local priorities are. So I just thought, you know, in terms of context, I very much, you know, 30 years of working on structural funds, I absolutely do appreciate the dynamics of the breadth of partners, and that's for your sector, but also the huge breadth of partners outside of your sector as well, that are outside of the public sector. So it's really something at the heart of what we are trying to strive to do in West Yorkshire. But I think it's at this point, I would say that all areas are very different. You know, Elizabeth mentioned, you know, that in some small, I would say in more the smaller councils, they probably haven't got an SPF lead. And I think this is the challenge of some of us have got larger allocations, some have got smaller allocations. And where local authority areas have got smaller allocations, they may choose to do something rather different that may affect your sector. But I think, you know, it is important that you don't just focus on the employment and skills angle of SPF. There are very much opportunities for you to engage across the three pillars, depending on what a local authority chooses to do. So just to bring it to life a little bit, I mean, I am living and breathing. I was still working at 11:30 last night, because we are just about to take a local paper to our local leaders for a proposal with a set of options about how we can best utilise the money in the area. And I have to say, it's been quite a challenging couple of weeks in terms of coming up even with a starter for 10. So I really do appreciate, you know, the challenges that others will be facing across the country in making some rather difficult decisions in what is a very, very challenging set of timescales. Just to put it in context, I had over a year to develop the ESIF strategy for Leeds City region. We have got the best part of 2 months maximum, really, to develop the investment plan. Now, in our area, we're quite fortunate in that we are starting from a very healthy starting point, but of course, that will not be the same across the country. So in terms of, just to bring it to life in West Yorkshire, we do have what we call a West Yorkshire investment strategy, and that does kind of set out at very high level what our investment priorities are for resources that may come into the region. Now, there will be similar types of plans in other areas, and I would absolutely encourage you to try and look at what the investment priorities are in an area. Now, that may be difficult to navigate. So yes, I think, you know, if we can get a set of contacts that can be shared with the sector, then I really do think that will help. But we do have a responsibility to make sure that we unlock the potential of the funding. I think the issue about how the sector engages will still be challenging. I think, it'd be fair to say that, because we have to consider about how and if actually activity needs to be procured, commissioned, whatever the terminology is, open competition, as opposed to some areas that actually it's probably best to be done in-house. When I say in-house, that probably is, working with our partner councils as a mayoral combined authority, or through other existing structures. So for us in West Yorkshire, we do want to make sure that this is an added funding stream to help us deliver our top investment priorities. We do want to make sure that we can simplify SPF, and I have to say, government colleagues have done an extremely good job in terms of the simplification. I think there is huge flexibility for local areas, but of course, like I say, on the flip side, the breadth of the programme potentially, makes it more difficult to make decisions about how to deploy the funding. Like I say, given the tight timescales, we haven't really got the time to overly discuss, what that looks like. And of course, we extremely pleased that, the funding has been devolved to a local level, whatever that level is, if it's local authority, combined authority, mayoral combined authority. But, for us, we know our areas. We do want to make the decisions ourselves because we think we know our areas best, and we very much welcome that from government. But equally, it will be really important that we have transparency in terms of doing that. So, yes, and now, again, just I'm I really tried to manage expectation, and I did notice in the ERSA, from an employment skills colleagues, it did say to try and get involved with your local partnership group. Now, I think that's just slightly misleading, because the local partnership group will be the formal governance structure that's put in place. Now, like Till said, that will be whatever's suitable to a particular area. But that would not be a partnership group that, all of you would be able to be invited to and attend. That's not how it's going to work. And I say I work with many of my equivalents across the country. This will be the formal governance. And yes, the sector, in terms of representing voluntary sector organisations, should be on a local partnership group. But I think the way it's just worded looks as if that's a key route for you to actively engage in, and I would question whether that is the case. Like I say, less money, so difficult choices to be made. We have been considering the European Social Fund dynamics, as I say, 30 plus years of working with European Social Fund. And just to illustrate this point, if you look at what government have said we are allowed to do at a local level, this is about targeted people and skills provision in an area that is at risk because it's predominantly delivered by voluntary sector organisations. Now, I emphasise the point here because I've just corrected some colleagues, within my own region. I think there is a slight, and I'll be interested to hear what Till might say on this, but it is about the provision rather than the organisation, and it's the provision that needs to wag the tail. So we have done a recce, for example, in West Yorkshire, and we think we only have 2 projects which would meet that criteria, but of course that does bring additional issues for us in the skills and employment area. What I would say is many areas like our own are looking at alternative funding sources to fill the gap, and it would be equally remiss of me as the head of the ESIF programme in our area to also not make it very clear that we, for example, are quite fortunate in that a lot of our provision is still funded by European Social Fund up to the end of next year. So again, you know, you can see that we need to make sure that this money adds value and fills the gap in areas. Totally agree with everything that everybody said. In our area, we will be putting an officer group in place as well, which will support the formal governance of the local partnership group, and we would expect there to be again a sector rep. So I think that's where you need to harness the contacts in terms of, you know, there should be a sector representative. I equally acknowledge that that is quite difficult to find one person or one organisation that can represent the sector in an area, but that should be happening in many areas across the country. So yes, absolutely make sure you're on mailing lists. We certainly have a mailing list that we engage and update our stakeholders on a regular basis. Yeah, absolutely make yourself, and it's the lead authority. So perhaps you it'd be really important that you know, you go back to what structures, you know, what level of delegation there has been given by government in a particular area. As I say, it's because it's not all to local council. So for example, in our area, we work in partnership with Wakefield Council, with Leeds City Council, with Bradford Council, Kirklees and Calderdale, but they are not the lead authority. So if you, for example, wanted to speak in our area, you would need to come through myself as the first point of call, so we can manage that relationship better. Most areas will be running webinars, events. Please make sure again that if you're on that mailing list, you try and attend, and as I say, you will know what is important for an area in terms of moving forward. And like I say, I think the commissioning procurement one is an interesting one. We, as I say, kind of lived and breathed it over the last couple of weeks. We have, I can probably tell you now, at this stage, we probably wouldn't be even thinking about doing that until the end of the year, the beginning of next year, and it will be in very, probably likely to be in quite niche areas to make sure that we are driving the best value for money, the best solutions to issues that we might have in a local area. So I think that I do get that could be a concern for the sector, but there are lots of ways to engage. The last thing I would just say is I would ask you to consider the communities and place side of the programme, as I say, more so even in the first couple of years of the fund, more so than the employment and skills bit, because in many areas the local councils will be doing quite a lot, and they will be coming at it from a very community local base, a place-based, place shaping angle, and that's a key area for you to engage in as well. So there are lots of opportunities. It's not just about employment and skills, but I hope I've been able to just share with you a little bit in terms of what it does mean in terms of our role on the ground. But I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Heather. Really helpful raising some issues with how the UKSPF is going to be delivered differently by local authorities, and how charities should be thinking about the opportunities to engage, which rise from that across all of those three strands of the UKSPF. So we're going to go to some questions now. There's a lot of questions which have been coming through, and we're going to try and get to as many as possible. We don't have time to get to all of them, so what we're going to do is try and put a kind of representative sample to the panelists. If we don't get to some of the more technical questions, we will try and get some responses outside of this event and then send them around as part of the follow-up research, follow-up materials. So I'm just going to start off with a question that was raised in a few different forms. We obviously know that this is going to be a shift for charities moving from ESF funds to UKSPF, particularly with the people and skills strand, which isn't going to be starting until 2024-25. So how should charities think about handling that transition between EU funding and UKSPF funding? And I think I might start with Till for that one, if that's all right. Sorry, Till, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Sorry. That's a good question. I think it's important to acknowledge that this is disruptive. I think for all of us. And I'd go back to what I said before. It's about engaging with your local authority to make sure that your organization and the services they provide are on their radar. And then I guess it's also about exploring what other opportunities there are to deliver those services, other funding opportunities if they exist, which I appreciate is not straightforward.
Thanks, Till. Tejesh or Heather, I don't know if you want to come in now.
I'm just going to correct you again, Till. It's not necessarily just to the local authority. I think it's the confusing message. Can we make sure that we're using the language of the lead authority so that we don't confuse our stakeholders, because it is different in each areas.
Tejesh, I don't know if you want to come in on the practical considerations for charities.
Yeah, thanks, Theo. So the truth is, this is a it's a bottom up approach really that you have to look at as a charity organisation across your strategy. Really, we're in a very challenging climate and environment. We need to adapt our strategies around that. Very much an opportunity to try and build those relationships with local authorities, but we've got limited resource, so there's going to be a need to kind of prioritise and focus. Understand how you can fit in and provide a solution where possible in terms of national fund strategies and outcomes, but it's a complex picture, so it's really about trying to prioritise and focus your energy where we think the opportunities are. I would say that there's no simple there's a transition, get on with it. It's a difficult situation.
Thanks, Tejesh. And then kind of digging into a little bit more around that kind of the bureaucracy that charities are going to have to tackle as part of this. How do all of the panelists view the kind of the role that charities are going to have to play of needing to partner with one and another and local authorities, and kind of then win the backing of the local MP before an application could be sent to Whitehall for their approval as well? I don't know if anyone's got views on how charities navigate.
I mean, I'm happy to come in, Theo, on that one. Yeah, I think it's extremely challenging. I would say from a local perspective, whilst we understand the role of MPs at a local level in terms of their involvement in local areas, it's quite a challenging ask for areas across the country. Yes, government have confirmed that the local plans are not solely dependent on full MP endorsement, but we will be hoping to set up an MP engagement group. Yeah, and if organisations want to speak to MPs about their projects, they can do, but I think that again I would come back to the timescales. We have to have we in our area will be taking the full time. We will be submitting to government for the SPF plan at the end of July. Of course, the multiply plan, which we haven't really talked about actually. And actually, just say something to that. There is potentially a really strong role for community organisations in multiply. In particular linked to the community learning side of because it has to be aligned to adult education budget. That plan has to be in by the 30th of June. Of course, not all areas have got multiply, but we are definitely working through that and looking at the role of the sector in multiply. Sorry, I should have said that as well. But I think in terms of the MP engagement, I think that's going to be really challenging. I'm not sure that there would be lots of added value if you went and spoke to your MP about your particular project, because we have to come back to what's strategically important in an area and best try and utilise the resources to help us deliver that.
I completely agree with Heather there. I think, first of all, also apologies for not mentioning the multiply investment plan earlier. I completely agree that your organisations have a role to play. Those of course will be assessed by the Department for Education, and then agree on the MPs. I think it's a strategic matter. The project selection won't be done by them anyway. That will be done by Heather and her counterparts across the country. Worth engaging with them in case of in terms of shaping the priorities that each place signs up to or identifies as needs, but perhaps less relevant in terms of lobbying for your individual project.
And I suppose, Till, a more kind of generally, do you have any views on the kind of bureaucratic burden that charities are going to have to take on with the different partnerships?
Well, so we'll provide a bit more guidance on sort of reporting requirements for places, and that's being worked up at the moment. I would hope, our ambition is that the bureaucratic burden is less than it was under ESIF. Partly it will depend on the requirements that places will put on projects that they commission, put out a call for, whatever route they choose. But yeah, I think it will look different in different parts of the country.
Tejesh, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just around the bureaucratic burden, I think, you know, people, and particularly the third sector, are quite scarred, I think, a little bit by the burden that we've faced for many years. This felt like a real opportunity to change that. But I think with the pace and the challenge to colleagues across local authorities, what we're already seeing, particularly through Community Renewal Fund and so on, is actually a replication. You know, people are starting with let's use the same model, because we don't necessarily have time to start with a blank sheet of paper. So it feels at the moment like there's a bit of a missed opportunity. I'm hoping that starts to develop more, and there's more dialogue around that, so we can actually see those challenges broken down quite quickly moving forwards.
Great.
I mean, one point maybe just to quickly raise is that we'll have fewer layers of audit and assurance. I think that's probably the one big difference from European funding. There won't be those additional European sort of assurance processes. But ultimately, obviously, we also need to make sure that there is value for money, that money is spent on the things that places say they would spend it on. So there will be an element of that, but our ambition is for that to be much less burdensome than it was under ESIF.
This was actually going to be the next question I was going to ask Theo, and that came up in the chat about the different ways that charities might expect the bureaucracy of UKSPF to be less stifling than under ESF. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
No, as I say, we'll provide some more guidance to places, but also, I mean, it will be helpful to beneficiaries, and it will look different in different parts of the country and different depending on how your place will choose to contract with you if you're providing activity. Yeah.
Okay, great. Our next question, we've heard a lot about charities should be talking to their local authorities or to their lead authorities. So I think just specifically it'd be helpful for everyone to hear who exactly should they be talking to in the lead or local authority.
So from our point of view, ideally there would be a named contact. Unfortunately, we don't have that list available, and if we had it, I think we have some data protection issues, which anyway, but your local councillor, council leader, I mean, the chief executive clearly isn't the person who will handle the plan writing, but their office might be able to point you in the right direction, would be my broad advice, but I'm sure Heather can give some views.
Yeah, please, Heather.
Yeah, Theo, I think perhaps we can try and assist here. The Local Government Association has been trying to do that work, actually, in terms of trying to have a contact for all areas. In fact, I've just been emailing him about something this morning. I will email him after this and just see how he's doing in terms of getting a contact. I think, like Elizabeth said, in some areas that's still not totally clear, but he's probably made some progress on that, and I will ask if we are able to share that with yourselves, and then you can cascade that down to your colleagues.
Thanks very much, Heather. Tejesh, I don't know if there's something you wanted to add there from a charity's perspective.
Yeah, I think for us it's trying to find the relevant contacts, particularly, you know, if we're talking about local authorities within your area, who are the right people within that space to talk to. I think it becomes very challenging if you're trying to lobby and engage with politicians within that space, as we've heard a bit of already, both because of, you know, the numbers of people we're talking about, but also because of the kind of layers back through to any form of kind of commissioning and planning structure. So I think in reality, for a lot of organisations, smaller organisations, similar organisations to ourselves, that's unrealistic. You need to probably focus more around that local authority contact, finding who's relevant.
Great, thanks very much, Tejesh. One final question before we end, which came up a few times. Are local authorities required to work with the voluntary sector in developing their investment plans, and how's that going to work? So I'll pass that over to you, Till, first, and then to anyone else who might have comments before we finish. Have we lost Till? Are you there? Hi, Till, did you hear that? I think we might have. Till, can you hear us now?
Sorry, yes, I had some connection issues. I missed the last minute or so. Sorry.
The final question I just wanted to ask was, are local authorities to work with the voluntary sector in developing the investment plans, and how's that going to work?
Sorry, could you repeat the beginning of? Sorry, I have some.
Are local authorities
the beginning of the question
required to work with the voluntary sector in developing the investment plans, and how's that going to work?
I think there's a strong expectation rather than, I mean, required is maybe the only ones they are fully required to are the members of parliament. But yes, we published a list in the prospectus of the kinds of organizations that we expect them to work with. So when we assess the plans, one thing we'll be looking at is how they have engaged with stakeholders, not just in the voluntary sector, but sort of across the whole breadth of organizations that might be relevant for across all three pillars. And I think what we want to see is a plan that has broad backing in the local community, and the way to demonstrate that is to show that you've engaged with local stakeholders and that their views have been taken on board. We don't expect, the plan to please everyone you've consulted, because clearly that's impossible. But we want to see a sort of how the conversations and the engagement is reflected and what do you think is the local priority, I suppose.
Great. Any final comments on that from Tejesh or Heather?
The only thing I would add on that is that I think, to be fair to my equivalents across the country, most of us would love to do more consultation and engagement, and especially with the sector. However, I do come back to timescales. The timescales are really, I mean, again, I use West Yorkshire, and I'm sure this is the same across my colleagues, is we need to, what we're in May now, we've probably got 4 weeks to write the investment plan up and agree the parameters of that in 4 weeks to be able to start consulting, even without really, our local leaders, never mind the breadth of the partnership. So I think the timescales are extremely challenging to do this extremely well, but I'm hoping that there is lots more opportunity to engage with the sector once the programs get going.
Great. Well, we're already over time, so I think we're going to have to leave it there today. But I just wanted to thank everyone for attending. You'll see my colleagues have posted a survey for the event in the chat, so please do fill that out. We at MPC are going to keep on doing work on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and levelling up more broadly, so do keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I think the final thing is just to thank our speakers, Till, Tejesh, Heather and Elizabeth, and all of you for attending. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay.